Hi, this is Soul Mechanics, practical tune-ups to be a healthy human, and I'm your host, Kate Foley. Do you ever think about what characters you play in your own life? Do you act differently with your friends than you do with your family? Perhaps you've heard of the powerful influence of archetypes. All of us know them. We can identify them within seconds. The princess, the martyr, the thief, the savior, the comedian. There are hundreds of archetypes. They're roles or personalities that we take on, and they're present throughout human history. They're subconscious, collective symbols bridging cultures and time. Have you ever looked at your own life and identified what archetypes are living through you? Do you acknowledge them? Do you accept them? Are there some archetypes that really bother you? For instance, if you're a princess, do other princesses threaten you? Are you looking for your Prince Charming? Take a look at some of the old fairy tales, not the Disney version. There's a lot of truth in those tales. Again, not the Disney version. You might just find some hidden answers to your age-old questions about your life. Why you make the choices you do, why you end up in certain scenarios with certain characters all the time. One interesting aspect to archetypes is that there's a light and a shadow to each one. You cannot engage one without the other. Yin does not exist without yang. They're polarities, and polarities are a part of our daily lives, nature, and the universe. One drives the other in constant fluid motion. An ancient dynamic that is very much utilized today is the victim and the perpetrator. I've had a lot of experience with this dynamic personally and professionally. And let me tell you, a victim can turn into a perpetrator with a thought. No one is safe from this dynamic. We all know it well. We all have a victim and a perpetrator living inside of us. We've all known victims and perpetrators in some form or another in our lives. It's when we deny it and suppress it that it begins to control us. The victim and perpetrator archetype is like a quarter. The victim is on one side, and the perpetrator is on the other side of the coin. You cannot separate them. Once you acquire this coin and begin to use it, you are engaging both sides. At face value, you may think that the victim is separate from the perpetrator, but turn the quarter over, and you'll see the two are very much connected. Victims who invest their energy in victimhood can easily become perpetrators. Perpetrators often act with harm, believing that they're justified because they feel wronged in some sense. They feel like victims. If anyone listening has been victimized by someone or something, the last thing you want to hear is that you've been connected to your perpetrator. But if you step back from the narrative and observe the dynamic, you can see the connection clearly. It takes a lot of detachment to do this, though, if you've ever been victimized. Also, if you've ever or are presently the victim of a harmful interaction, pay attention to your thoughts and feelings. Feelings of vengeance or human justice can lead you to the perpetrator within. I'm not telling you that these feelings are wrong or unjustified. I am simply guiding you to look at the dynamic. It is something to observe. It is real and an archetype that is within all of us. Sometimes these archetypes present themselves at certain times in our lives. We engage with them, learn from them, and move on. However, there can be a dysfunctional attachment to an archetypal dynamic. With the victim and perpetrator, especially now in the global consciousness, the victim has a lot of power. The victim receives attention, validation, pity, excuses, and sometimes becomes a media darling. A person who identifies with victimhood and invests in the attention and validation for this role will find it very difficult to extract themselves from the role. Each time we identify strongly with victimhood or anything, the world around us responds and bolsters it. There's an old saying that what you pour your energy into will flourish, and it applies here. If you keep investing and living within this archetype, it's going to get really heavy really fast. It'll weigh you down, but at the same time, you'll be rewarded for it. Victimhood relinquishes you from self-accountability. The role allows you to excuse yourself from taking responsibility for your own life. It creates a stagnation of sorts. All of your choices will be made from the victim's perspective. You'll wonder why things keep happening to you. You'll feel as though you have no control over your circumstances. You'll begin to look at your life through a victim's lens. Everything will seem unjust, unbalanced, cruel, and dim. You'll look at your life and relationships and see victims and perpetrators everywhere, and drama everywhere. It'll grow incredibly fatiguing, and the dynamic takes a lot of your energy. I'm sure there are plenty of you out there who know all about this. When you're immersed in something so consuming, you begin to compensate with addiction, with poor decisions, with mood fluctuations, with perpetrators as friends or partners. You might even engage other archetypes that support your victimhood. For instance, if you're really attached to your victimhood, you might begin to engage the savior archetype. So if you have a savior archetype, many of your relationships are a dynamic of you saving people, and you expect them to be grateful to you, and maybe even revere you. This can take many forms. You might heal people's physical ailments. You might fix your neighbor's appliances. Maybe you're an expert advice giver and help people with their problems. There's nothing wrong with any of this. The problem arises with your expectations from them. But what happens when you save someone who isn't grateful? Or do they need you to save them continuously? Maybe you can't provide enough for them. Maybe they're grateful, but they don't give you enough praise. How do you react to this? Do you begin to feel like a victim? Take a step back. You don't have to engage with any of this. Evaluate. Identify the ways in which you're participating in this dynamic. Own it. Be accountable. Educate yourself on these archetypes, on any archetype. Look at how your relationships might be tumbling into this dichotomy. Understand the relationship from a detached perspective. Observe yourself. Observe your relationships. Don't begin pointing fingers at people. That just leads you further into the archetype dynamic, and you'll be moving closer to the perpetrator if you begin to blame others. Now, I'm not saying don't be a victim. Many of us are victimized by people and events that are beyond our control. When you've been victimized by something or someone, you need to acknowledge that you've been victimized. Then you might need to process what happened. You might need to talk about it with a trusted friend or counselor. You might need a period of time to heal. However, there's a moment when we choose to take accountability for our lives and move past the victimization, or we choose victimhood. There's a difference between being victimized versus investing in victimhood. Taking accountability sounds something like this. Yes, that event happened, but it doesn't define me. I've learned something valuable, some valuable lessons from this event. I've learned more about myself. Now I'm ready to move on with my life. Victimhood sounds something like this. I will never heal this wound. It has taken something from me that can never be healed. I will bleed every day and make everyone I know understand my pain from this event. Do you see the difference? Can you feel the difference? Do you know anyone who expresses these traits? Can you see how close to becoming a perpetrator the person in victimhood is? Identifying with victimhood and inviting it into your life can begin the process of falling into becoming a perpetrator, and the cycle goes on. Self-accountability applies to the perpetrator as well, of course. The word perpetrator carries a lot of stigma to it. But if you define the archetype as someone who willingly and knowingly intends to harm someone or something, this is not limited to physical harm. Take a look at your thoughts and intentions toward others. Do you have anyone in your life whose success threatens you? Are you envious of anyone? Does a coworker irritate you? Does someone else's way of life bother you? Did your spouse leave you for someone else? The political environment is pretty polarizing. Do you have any stance against another party? Do you wish ill will on a segment of our society? Be honest. We're all people with complexity and varying experiences. Someone is bound to threaten you. Where is the perpetrator in you? Sometimes it isn't about an actual traumatic event leading to victimization or victimhood. It can simply be that we're investing our time and attention in this dynamic. If you begin to identify this archetypal interaction, you're going to notice it everywhere. You can see it all over the news and social media. And that doesn't mean it shouldn't exist. This interaction is a part of us just like our fingers and toes. But we only need 10 fingers and 10 toes. If we started growing fingers and toes everywhere, life would become very difficult. This analogy applies to the victim and perpetrator dynamic as well. It's a part of us. It needs to be acknowledged, but not indulged. And it doesn't need to grow into every area of our lives. When you begin to see that you have the potential for both victim and perpetrator, when you accept that both exist within you, the dynamic becomes more neutral and integrates. Your pocket of quarters gets lighter. It's not about acting on this archetypal interaction. It's about acknowledging that it exists. When you look at someone and say, "I'm nothing like them," you're lying to yourself. Look closer. Get closer. Learn about that person, and you'll find a similarity somewhere within yourself. We all share light and dark aspects. We all have predators and prey within us. You cannot deny it. Maybe you live in a very peaceful setting with supportive structures and many resources. With the right environment, you have the support to be kind, loving, compassionate, and generous. But change your surroundings. Change your upbringing. Take away any support or love and replace it with cruelty, manipulation, and control. You might be a very different person with predatory urges. This is nature. I don't care where you live, how easy or hard your life seems. We all share the same compulsions, cravings, and darkness. We all share the same desires for love, being loved, and being understood. For those of you who are looking at your lives and saying to yourself, "No, this doesn't apply to me. I'm not a victim, and I'm certainly not a perpetrator." Do you enjoy gossip? Do you obsessively watch videos involving violence? What about the news? Are you a news junkie? Do you instigate political conversations just for an argument? Do you balk at celebrities? Are you an activist? I'm not saying stop watching the news or don't be political or don't stand up for something you believe in. I'm suggesting some mindfulness when it comes to your motivations and judgments. Spectators are just as much a part of the victim and perpetrator dynamic as the participants. Taking a chronic role in this dynamic without acknowledgement will eat away at your very being, and it certainly corrodes a society. Choose another coin. Lighten your pockets. Be nimble. Once you're free of the quarters, you won't miss them, and you'll be very aware when a quarter lands in your pocket. This is Kate Foley. Thank you for listening.